Welcome, welcome. I am Fred Wellman. This is On the Line with Vote Vets every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central, 11 o'clock Mountain, 10 o'clock Pacific. There you go. Figured it all out. Hawaii, I don't know. I lived there for 3 years. I have no idea what time it is there. But look, it's great to have you guys here. Welcome to the show as everybody gathers. The usual folks. Good to see you guys. Say hi in the comments. As you know, JJ, the producer's monitoring the comments, ready to say hi. I'm glad to see you guys here. We have a fascinating show this week. Look, a lot happened this week, right? Crazy week in the United States, crazy week around the world. We're going to talk a little bit what's going on with our veterans and our military and all the things that are happening. Obviously, it's a lot of news. I won't waste time. We got a great guest with a great story of what happened, what's happening at our VA. Because you guys know we're spending a lot of time focusing on, what is going on at VA? How can we fight back against the dismantling of veterans benefits, veterans healthcare, even as the administration, of course, is telling us that everything's fine, nothing to see here. It's kind of like that Naked Gun police squad, meme, like nothing to see here, please disperse, as everything explodes behind them. That is how it feels like sometimes being a veterans advocate right now in the time of Trump 2 and the time of Doug Collins, who just gets up there like, folks, hey, folks, he's always like, Mr. Folks. And well, we've got a lot of the good folks at ProPublica have done a brilliant job of getting the information. They always do. It's why they win all the awards. And we've got a great person to talk to. Eric Umansky will be here with us shortly. Let's jump into the news, JJ. Let's kind of talk about what happened this week. I guess we'll start with this one. Congratulations, everybody. Happy Victory Day yesterday. Obviously, it's Victory Day for the war in Europe. If you know history, if you don't know history, if you slept through history, you probably know that VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, is May 8th, 1945. That's when our allies in Europe celebrate the end of the war. England was, France, Germany was, liberated, if you will. The Russians, it's called Victory Day. Well, Donald Trump decided that he wanted to get in on that action because it bothers him that our friends, the Russians, celebrate Victory Day and the French and everybody else because, we're cooler. He likes to say we did more to win the war than any of them. And so he declared May 8th Victory Day, victory in World War I Day. Flaw in the plan? You see the picture, right? Do you guys know where that was? That was Iwo Jima, which was in the Japan theater of operations in Pacific. That war didn't end until around August, really September, because that's when they signed the surrender. After we dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan in August of 1945. But Trump being Trump, the Trump administration being Trump administration, they posted this picture on Victory in Europe Day to show, you can't make these things up. But now, mind you guys, he says this is the new holiday. It's a declaration. We're still fighting with them because they want to change Veterans Day to Victory for World War I Day because we want to celebrate winners. And I know all of the non-living World War I veterans are going to appreciate that because there are no World War I veterans alive. Anyways, next story. So in addition to that, we have, of course, his big parade. He had an interview on NBC this week. Last week, I did an interview. They are saying, he told them that it's a big, beautiful military parade, Washington, D.C., to commemorate Flag Day, which is also the 250th anniversary and birthday of the United States Army, which is the 79th birthday of Donald J. Trump. He spent most of the interview talking about Flag Day because apparently he has no idea it's Army's birthday, which was going to be a celebration anyway. So where this comes from is the Army was going to do a celebration of sorts for their 250th birthday. They were going to bring a few vehicles in display. They're going to do a thing on the National Mall. No big deal, just a few vehicles, maybe some helicopters, some troops to mark the day. But no, Donald Trump's always wanted his military parade. We've seen the route now. It goes from the Pentagon across Memorial Bridge. A good friend of ours on the staff here at Vote Vets pointed out Memorial Bridge might not be able to handle 65-ton tanks. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. Nonetheless, he says his birthday happens to be on Flag Day. It's a complete coincidence. He says his parade isn't for his birthday, but it's for Flag Day. But, I think it's June 14th because it's an important day. This parade won't be cheap. We've seen numbers as high as 95 million. Defense officials told NBC 45 million, with individual Army units ultimately bearing most of the cost of that parade to ship their troops all the way there. The list of stuff they're bringing is unbelievable. We're talking 6,600 U.S. Army soldiers, 50 aircraft, 150 military vehicles, including wheeled vehicles as Humvees and trucks, and tracked vehicles like tanks. All that has to be shipped to Washington, D.C. All that has to be put in place. There's gas, there's train costs, there's TDY for soldiers. They're not going to put them in tents, folks. You could probably put them in hotel. I mean, it goes on and on how silly this thing is because of Trump's massive ego. He wants troops walking down the Constitution Avenue. They'll start at the Pentagon, march across Memorial, up Constitution, all the way to the end where they have in the evening on June 14th, where they'll be followed by, and I quote from a story from Axios, a music festival, probably country music people, which I thought was great. There'll be a MAGA music festival on the National Mall for Donald Trump's birthday, Army birthday. Of course, none of this has anything to do with making lives better for our service members, improving our readiness, improving our security. And the whole joke of them trying to save money goes right out the window when you drop $45 million. And by the way, you transfer that cost to individual units who would be using that money to train for war because they're war fighters. Instead, we'll be doing this. We'll keep talking about it. If he wants to do it, I mean, look, folks, I know a lot of us have said, oh, you want the military to stand up. No, it's legal. It's legal to do it. It's just monumentally stupid. Next story. This is a fascinating one. This is classic New York Post story. So we've been reporting to you for a couple of weeks now, or a couple of months now, I guess. And by the way, thanks for everybody gathering. It's good to see so many familiar faces in the chat. So a couple weeks ago, I reported you all the turmoil in Hegseth's office, right? At DOD, that like upwards of five of his officials got booted out, have left the office, have left the Hegseth's office. As it turns out, this gentleman, Colonel Berea, who's I think Colonel Berea is his name, Ricky Berea, is the sort of the de facto chief of staff. And this hit piece was written on him in the New York Post today because it says the drama surrounding Pete Hegseth's Pentagon has a new lead player, a top aide known to his detractors as Rasputin Ricky. Okay, so he is a full-bird colonel in the Marine Corps. You know how hard that is to achieve. Any of our Marines here in the chat know how hard it is to make actual colonel in the Marine Corps. It's a pretty big deal. He has been on the staff. He was on the staff when Biden was in office. He was an aide to Secretary of Defense Austin previously, and now he's remained. But the problem is he's also very clear about where he's criticism. He's been caught doing the nastiest, worst thing you could possibly imagine. He criticized J.D. Vance. So he's considered a hardworking guy. He's fashioned himself as a China hawk. The story, if you can look at something, the New York Post, it really is bizarre, this story. I mean, the deeper you read, and it's a long story. It's well-sourced with anonymous sources. As you dive deeper into it, it's so clear that this was meant to be a takedown of this gentleman. Apparently, he put in his retirement papers to actually be appointed the civilian political appointee chief of staff, Pete Hegseth. The White House has said no. The White House, because he doesn't have the ideology, he doesn't fit with them ideologically, and that's the whole issue. He loathes the border mission. He thinks it's a waste of money, resources, and time. He wants to focus on China. He was one of the people who pushed back on J.D. Vance when Vance pushed back against the Yemen strikes. He liked the Yemen strikes. The weirder stuff in the story near the end, though, is amazing. Talk about how he ingratiated himself very well to Jennifer Hegseth. At one point, there's an anecdote in the story where they were so worried about leakers. If you remember a week ago, we told you how Hegseth was screaming at 4-star generals that they're leakers. Well, Colonel Berea actually handed his phone to Jennifer Hegseth so she could go through his phone and see there's no text messages or anything to any of the bad people. So it's just this weird, you talk about palace intrigue, you watch Game of Thrones. I guess the only difference is nobody's being beheaded yet, but it's just as much a Game of Thrones. Everybody's stabbing each other in the back. Everybody's fighting for time. For now, my favorite one, and the final paragraph of the story, I will put a link later, I think, but you got to go see the story. The final part, this is my favorite part of the whole story. Detractors, meanwhile, have circulated an image of him applauding the January 12th unveiling of a portrait of Mark Milley, the anti-Trump former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as a LinkedIn post in which he praised Biden's spokeswoman, Sabrina Singh, writing, and this, you guys, is his shock. He wrote on LinkedIn, "I can't wait to serve with you again." I mean, honestly, it's a miracle he's still in the military at all after that, right? Supporting a colleague, but that's where we're at right now. That's how it works in the Trump world. This has Laura Loomer's footprints all over it. This is Laura Loomer's fingerprints all over it. If you guys have been following the stories, Laura Loomer's been a major, major part of getting people fired from their jobs. She whispers in Trump's ear how they're not loyal. The next thing you know, hit pieces like this come out and the person gets defenestrated pretty quickly. If we were Russia, they'd be thrown out of windows, but this is America. They get Loomered. They get Loomered by Laura Loomer. And that's what this smells like to me. But it's the drama that goes on in the Department of Defense. Meanwhile, nowhere in that story do you find anything about actually taking care of our service members, fixing the problems we have with our barracks. There's been a lot of reporting lately how the Army is struggling with their dining facility contracts. There's been a lot of talk about how TRICARE for military family members or retirees like me is all screwed up. The transition went really badly. But don't worry about any of that. We got to worry about who's leaking things to the press in the head shed instead of actually taking care of troops. This is what the Trump administration worries about. Final story I want to talk about. This is an interesting one we reported on a few weeks ago, if you remember. The VA had launched a anti-Christian bias task force. And if you remember our reporting on that, I told you guys how this involved actually a tip line where you could write the tip line and and turn in your peers, turn in fellow coworkers of the VA who have been displaying anti-Christian bias. Well, now the Stars and Stripes, which is terrific newspaper, by the way. If you want to pay for it, it's worth it. They break a lot of news. Stars and Stripes reporting how the incidents they've identified is because apparently last year the Coatesville VA Medical Center in Pennsylvania, a local chaplain, the chaplain for them, who is also an Army Reserve chaplain, got up and did a sermon at the open church service. Now, if you understand the military, if you understand VA and all this, generally speaking, our church services are neutral, somewhat neutral, if you will. While our chaplains may come from different denominations, to include Catholic or Lutheran or Baptist, there's generally meant to be a general Christian service. They tend to steer away from very controversial issues. Well, this chaplain did not do that. Chaplain Russell Truby is a Army Reserve chaplain, just like Doug Collins, who was an Air Force Reserve chaplain, and he actually gave a sermon where he said, "When a culture excludes God," was the title of his sermon, and in that he went into great detail of how the Bible forbids homosexual activity and is against it. He was actually, a number of people walked out of his sermon and walked out of the church service. Veterans who were attending walked out. A lot of folks were offended by what he said. Apparently, he was told he can't do that. Afterwards, he was actually taken off his job, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into great detail because you get where this is going. In the end, the First Liberty Institute filed a lawsuit, and one of his very first act as VA secretary, Collins came in and exonerated the chaplain and lifted all the policies there were for limited prescribing the content of VA sermons. So this is all about reserve chaplain taking care of a reserve chaplain. It's not about anything else. This is what their entire anti-Christian bias thing came from, this one incident at one hospital, and now they're pursuing this. Again, tying you back to our last story, and by the way, the story for the rest of this conversation we're going to have with Eric is none of this has to do with taking care of veterans. Okay? None of this has to do with taking care of veterans. The VA is a healthcare provider. They also help guys get their GI Bill. They help guys get their homes. They are not another religious organization. That's not their job. Their job is to provide health care to our veterans. But the issues that DOD cares about under Hegseth, the issues that Doug Collins cares about under him is, one, these kind of issues, and two, getting into whatever Doge wants. And that brings us to our main story and the conversation I'm excited to have with our guest for the rest of the show. By the way, thanks everybody. So many guys gather, and tell your friends, share the link. Let's have more people join us. Ask some questions in the chat. JJ's monitoring that for you. Lot going on. So this story came out last week. I'm really impressed with the story, and it shows that internal emails reveal how Trump's cuts have been jeopardizing things. They got dozens of emails of ProPublica, and they reveal a very different reality from what we're being told from Doug Collins. So I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Eric Umansky. He is the editor-at-large of ProPublica. ProPublica is a nonprofit newsroom that investigates abuses of power. Eric has been with them for a while, and while there has overseen not one, but two Pulitzer Prize winning teams, and the outlet just won another Pulitzer Prize this year, about 3 weeks ago. Eric Umansky, welcome to the show, so we're glad to have you join us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for waiting so long, too. I got long-winded there. I'm looking at the clock. Damn, Wellman, shut up.
Okay.
I'm tired of hearing myself.
Okay.
JJ is probably in the private chat saying, Fred, shut up, Fred. But here we are. Welcome to the show, Eric. Thanks for taking time for us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the story, what we found, and what we're looking at. Yeah.
Well, we've been told since Doug Collins took over that they're focused exclusively on reform, making VA more efficient. They've implemented a host of policies that are undermining. I mean, the fact is the policies they're putting out are undermining that. You guys got, can you tell us a little bit about what you got, this pile of emails, what they are, where they came from?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure your listeners and viewers are plenty familiar with it, but the baseline is that the administration and Secretary Collins have promised that they are going to put veterans first.
Right.
And the president has said, "I love veterans. We're going to take care of our veterans." And so we wanted to look at what the reality is.
Yeah.
What are actually people saying and finding on the ground? And so we started talking to people within the VA,
Yep.
and just keep in mind, I know you guys have talked about cuts, but it's a little bit of context. Um, there have been all sorts of cuts and changes in policies that have introduced a lot of chaos at the VA, but the administration has said, no, 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 we're putting money back. Any money that we're taking out, we're putting back to help out
Right.
veterans.
Right.
And so in talking to people, you know, things started coming to us. I don't want to get into detail
Sure.
in order to protect people, but things started coming to us, and there's this interesting thing somebody told me about, which is that the VA has a system that's actually great, which is that when there is a threat or a problem to that could undermine veterans care, there's a system for alerting higher ups about it. It's called issued briefs, and it's literally
Issue
a
briefs.
form that it's called issued
Yeah.
briefs, and there's a form that you fill out, and you send it. Essentially, it goes to a mailing list.
Yeah.
And historically, it's like the boiler room is has water in the bottom, and we haven't been able to clean it up, and so what that
Yeah.
means or whatever, it's not necessarily huge issues, and there are a lot of them that come out. But what's happened since January 20th is that VA officials at hospitals and clinics around the country have been saying, well, there's, just to take one thing, a hiring freeze. The hiring
Right.
freeze has caused us to lay off all these researchers
Right.
or, all these other people. And it's really hurting our ability to help veterans, to provide veterans care. And sometimes the emails sort of warn of, if we don't get this resolved
Yeah.
soon, there are gonna be big problems. And sometimes they're saying there are big problems. And so we spent time digging into what exactly, sometimes the emails could be weeks old, and so we dug into what's the reality on the ground. And we found that in some instances that the VA actually was responsive. There was in the LA VA, they warned that because of a contract that was canceled, it literally says we are going to have to stop all chemotherapy, and that's not going to be a
That
good
seems
moment for the
bad. I don't.
VA
I'm not a
or
professional.
veterans. Yeah, it's just going to be bad all around. And so the VA, there was like an appeal, and okay, they gave the contract back. But in other cases, the impact is totally ongoing. There were these cancer trials in Pittsburgh that for neck and head cancer, advanced head and neck cancer. So these are people who don't have great options, don't have
Yeah.
potentially many options at all, and still haven't started. Or also there were all sorts of impacts that, yes, Doge or the VA got around to addressing them, but what that meant was that there was harm for weeks on end. So in Colorado, for example, there were social workers who were laid off, and what that meant was that homeless veterans there were not getting the help they needed. right? And okay, the social workers got rehired, and so there was a month where they didn't get
but it took a month, right, to get him back.
Yeah,
It's like,
yes. So it's really was a striking picture of the consequences of chaos that have been imposed.
Yeah. And it's the cut. I think what struck me about reading your story is that it shows the chaos on the inside. What we've been saying, we've been saying from day one. When we heard they cut the contracts, we then they brought them back. We heard they laid off 1,000 people, or they put out the fork in the road emails, and they're denying the whole time it has any impact. But they're also keeping secret how many people have taken them. I was sent a leak. Apparently, it was online, but a screenshot of a chart that shows. I think the VA already took it offline, but there's 11,000 people have left since Collins took over, and there's just no way that's not going to affect veterans healthcare in very real ways. The picture I see, though, maybe you do too, having read these and talked to some folks over there, is just chaos, right? Like every day changing truth, right? It's just a picture of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, for some certain level of people, an enormous amount of time responding to this query from Doge, and justifying this contract, rather than providing care. The other thing that was sort of striking to me was we had a picture of chaos that has the agency has faced with really kind of a few thousand cuts, right? And cuts to contracts. And the secretary has said that they aim to cut 80,000 people. So, and they won't give any details about what those cuts are going to be, other than to say, frontline medical providers are going to be protected. But as I was just saying, the problem with that is, I mean, as this one person I was talking to, who's a doctor at the VA, was telling me, is that, doctors are going to be protected, but then everybody who, if it's a surgeon, gives the surgeon their tools and keeps the, heart-lung machine operating and whatever, could face cuts. I mean, you can't, the military knows that, for every soldier, there's X people behind them, right? And you can't just say, if you lay off, half of the people that are in the supply chain, that's not gonna be great. Which I'm not saying, that I'm not making an argument about, saving the that there can't be savings, or that there can't be changes. But it's really about, are you doing things in a transparent way? Are you doing them in an informed way? And are you doing them, and what's your goal? If your goal is to improve healthcare, which is great,
Yeah, but we got no proof. Actually, I have a video. Do you have that video, JJ, of him testifying yesterday? Because in your story, the original story, you said we'll know more tomorrow when he testifies. And I think we have a brief video of him testifying. Do you have that, JJ? Yeah, let's run that real quick, and you'll see what I mean, Eric.
A guy, and I'm not suspicious, but the fact that you won't tell us what the contracts are that are being renegotiated makes me wonder if there are things in those contracts that maybe you don't want us to know about.
Well, I will say that from my perspective, that is not it, and we'll work to get you the information you need.
When?
We're working through it now. We sent the last,
How about by next Friday?
I'll get with our folks and see what we can provide you at that time, and we'll see what we can get to you.
Well, that's really not a very satisfactory answer. It seems to me this couldn't be simpler, just a list of 585 contracts. Somebody has that list. I don't know why you can't supply it to this committee.
My favorite part is I did a video yesterday, Eric. Do you have that picture, JJ? You guys see this picture? This is from a video. And you've been following this, Eric. They have not kept it private. That's the video he did on February 28th with folks, look at this list I was just handed. These are the contracts we've got. And that was the day he cut 800 contracts, February 28th. And maybe, Eric, you're a reporter, I'm not. Isn't that a list in his hand? I mean, it looks like You know what I mean? It looks like he has a list of the contracts. He just won't give it to Congress. You know,
I will tell you, we've done and are continuing to do reporting on the contracts. And I sort of assumed, you hear about Doge canceling this contract
yeah,
and that just across the government. And you think like, oh, so there must be a list somewhere. I mean, it is the federal government after all. It's, we're not talking about
it's
the
published.
NSA's contracts.
Yeah, they
Right.
literally publish those
And
contracts publicly.
right. The contracts are published, and the amount of journalist hours that we have had to spend simply trying to construct, get a clear sense of, okay, well, what's actually been cut at the end of the day? Because, Doge has its Doge wall, it's like scalps
Yeah.
thing. And, it's just not, it's just a partial list. It's not a full thing. And, and then so you're stuck piecing things together. And it's just like, that can't be the right way to run a railroad, particularly
Right.
in a representative democracy.
Right.
So
And we know, we here at Vote Vets, we have a lot of friends who are federal contractors. They have a lot of disabled veterans. One thing you do know, it does take a second to find out that not a majority, but a very big, large minority of the contracts that VA gives out go to veteran-owned small businesses, especially disabled veteran-owned small business. I was the owner of a disabled veteran small business. I didn't have any contract. I did one contract with VA, I think, years ago. But when they're cutting these contracts, they're cutting business for hundreds, if not thousands, of veterans who have jobs, who do important work. And it's shocking to me that 3 months in, they won't even tell Congress the oversight who they're doing it to. But I know of at least one good friend who lost five. That first one, that February 28th, the picture I posted, they lost five contracts in one day. And I don't know if you heard, they had 3 days. They were given a call 3 days later saying, you have till the end of business today to justify your contracts. When the outpouring of it's just no way to. I wouldn't run a business like that. No matter a government agency that takes care of millions of veterans.
So I watched Secretary Collins' testimony, and I gotta say, until I watched it, I did not fully understand just how much detail about cuts essentially at the VA that they are refusing to publicly disclose. So this is contracts they won't say. Then there's the question of, well, who exactly have you cut? Who exactly have you laid off so far? What kinds of workers are they? They have not said. Who exactly are you planning on cutting off? They won't say. And I think it was Senator Blumenthal who noted that they had sent 41 inquiries to the VA to try to get information without a substantive response to one yet, which is striking.
And the thing is, you want to give it off to malevolence, but we're also kind of seeing just plain incompetence too. That they've hired a bunch of people who've never worked in government, right? Many of these guys they're just because they're loyalists. They were vetted for the Project 2025 database. It's like, I don't know if you saw Kash Patel, was yesterday. They're like, by law, you're supposed to have a budget by now. Yep. When will we have it? I don't know. I mean, it's like, okay, they can't even do the most basics of their job. So it's like, what is it? What is the saying? It may just be malfeasance, but nonetheless, again, I always circle back to the same thing. 6 million veterans plus rely on their health care from this organization, and the chaos, like you said, let's go back to that one you mentioned, the social workers that were laid off. Well, that meant that homeless veterans weren't being processed. Homeless veteran, I think you have a screenshot of that one, the homeless veterans one, JJ somewhere, but but they were gone for a month, so others had to pick it up. The thing about cutting people, we know this in the military, is the job doesn't ever go away. The work just goes to someone else, doesn't it? And I'm sure you're getting word, and I think you may have seen it in those emails, probably all the ones you reviewed, of an overworked and tired workforce, right?
Yeah, and some of the positions, frankly, can't be easily refilled. I mean, I'll give you an example of one we actually didn't even get into in the story. But as we mentioned in the story, there's a lot of the ones that were shared with us happen to involve cancer. I don't know if that's because that's what was shared with us or because, and one of the ones of those involves radiation treatment. And so it turns out one of the emails said that there's this particular position called a dosimetrist, which is like I've never heard of before, that is a highly technical position to set the dosage of radiological treatment. And it was at a hospital in I think in New England, and not a large hospital, so they only had 2 of these positions. And what happens is apparently you can do this job remote, and the whole industry does it remote now.
Yeah.
Well, these 2 people were hired, were told they had to return to the office because there's a return to office mandate. And so the administrators in the hospital sent this warning saying, if we lose these people, we're afraid we're going to lose these people because they've told us that they're not interested in staying. We're going to have to shut down radiation treatment. Right now, as it happens, we actually reported it out and basically got a sense it's not immediate and whatever. But my point is, you can't always cover it with the person standing next to you, right?
No.
I mean, so the more cuts you do, the more the system is stressed, and it can have these surprising single fail points. Right. And you may end up hitting this.
And that's the thing I worry about. It's been surprising to me, and I have a lot of friends at VA who've been sending me tips and stuff. And that return to work order has been much more dramatic and damaging than they ever want to admit. I think that's one of the reasons they're trying to cover it up. They're simply that people were not hired to be in an office. It was never a return to work for these folks. They just never were working in office. We hired military spouses for that very reason from around the world so they could work remote. One of my friends is a social worker supervisor at a VA VISN, and she told me that she's trying to find a place for one of her counselors who is 70 miles from the nearest VA facility.
Yeah.
It's like, why would someone go from working in their living room doing telehealth, doing mental health from their couch, like one does these days, and drive 70 miles to sit in a cubicle with no privacy, do the same thing? And I think that's where that 11,000 number we saw float across the screen before VA got hold of it, showing so many people are leaving, that that's the real down. And I think that's, do you think maybe, Eric, and this is in the world of opinion, I know you're a journalist. Do you think maybe the warning of 83,000, for a lot of us, we felt like by them telegraphing they're going to get rid of 80,000 people and then never saying who they'd be, there was sort of a hope to kind of goose that voluntary departure thing. I mean, I remember when the Army did this when I was a young officer in the early 90s. They said, we're going to cut X amount. Hey, but you can get out now and we'll pay you to leave, instead of getting cut later. So a lot of people leave. Do you know what I'm saying? It feels like that's a part of it.
They try to scare people straight.
Right. Almost a purple. Yeah. To get the numbers they need through just sort of the threat that it's coming.
I want to be careful not to get into people's
Sure,
heads.
I know. I'm putting you in a place.
They can have all
Sorry.
sorts of, no, it's fine. It's fine. But, I think that one thing I will say, this is just a fact that we reported, is, Russ Voigt, the guy who leads Project 2025 or led it, had a explicit strategy for federal workers writ large, right? And that was to cause federal workers pain, to get them to leave, right? And so the notion that, if you're a therapist and you're being put in a room, the New York Times had this great story a couple of days ago, that, it looks like a call center in a, boiler room situation. You're like, that's not a flaw, that's a feature from their perspective, right? I mean, making things unpleasant, that's the explicit goal. Now, does that necessarily mean it's the case across the government? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, they did say it, and he's in charge. The emails are coming from him, and And again, to then turn around and say, we want these federal workers to be uncomfortable, we want them to leave, and then turn around and we're not going to affect veterans' health care. It defies common sense and any reasonable, realistic assessment that you can't have it both ways. You can't terrorize and make the lives miserable to people who provide care and then say you're not going to affect your care. Now, there's been a lot of back, I know you guys just had a second story come out. There's been a lot of pushback from Democrats and others. Since the story came out, and I know you guys put out, we should probably put it up, JJ, if we can, but you've got a tip line for people to send you tips. Other veterans, we should get that from you before we go. So have you heard more since the first story came out? I mean, I know from my own experiences, it must be a flood of people saying, oh, that's nothing, buddy. Are you seeing more like that? You're probably getting flooded right now, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We have not just a tip line, but a form that people can fill out and give us details about who they are, how they've interacted with the VA, any issues that they're seeing. And we are, I can't emphasize this enough, really, really eager to hear from, particularly veterans, but also, of course, anybody who may be at the VA themselves. And, in all those circumstances, we keep all your information confidential, and we don't put out your story unless you tell us it's okay to do so.
And I would be remiss if I didn't circle back to talk about the fact that they issued an official tweet thread, as one does in the Trump administration. So for those, that these guys won't answer your inquiries or on time, they'll blow you off. But when you do a story about them, they'll do a Twitter thread attacking the journalists.
I gotta say, So here's an interesting thing. I just credit where credit is due. The VA, we practice what we call no surprises journalism. So we go to whatever entity that we're writing about and say, here's everything that
here's what we got.
Here's what we got. And, are we wrong about some of this? We want to hear from you. And the VA, the press secretary, sent us a response that was almost as long as the story itself. And detailed, line by line. No. And we adjusted some things in the story and took out some things in the story as a result. And, that was great. We really apprecited that.
Yeah, I mean, the original story talks about how they did fix some of those things that they did.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right, we just, put it right in there. And
it's fair.
Right. And now the tweet thread. So one of my joys in life, I will say, and I'll just leave it at this. I mean, the secretary, just to give everybody the context, called us a far left publication. And that we were being misleading and so forth. What he did not do was say we got anything wrong in the story. Just I will note that. And so, we're planning a response, and anybody who, if you're engaging with us, we'll engage with you.
The one thing I said as a government spokesman, and I did it. I was in the Army. I was a spokesman there. Is like, and I used to tell my bosses, like, I would get in it. Did I lose you? Still there? Yeah. Oh, the government spokesman. No, I loved you guys. No, I was in Baghdad, so I had like New York Times, bureau chief Jonathan Fisher Burns, double Pulitzer Prize.
Sure, John Burns with the great hair. I remember.
Great hair, and I was blessed that John took me under his wing when I arrived in Baghdad in, I want to say 2005, and he was like, "Come here, I'm going to tell you something." But when you got something like J.F. Burns up your ass, for those who don't know, John was a legendary war correspondent. Spent most of his career overseas in London. He's actually Englishman. Was theory. I mean, any war zone, John Fisher Burns was there. He was the bureau chief in New York Times in Baghdad for the large portion, the early parts of probably the first 6 years of the war. I think he passed away not like 3 or 4 years ago, but just a legendary journalist in our world. But my rule was simple. It's like, my way to communicate to the American people of what we're doing is through you, the journalists, the media, and I would have to try and get that information, and I would answer. And I told boss, I get an inquiry from you guys, and it was my job to make sure you got the information back to you. And it's been it's been challenging for me as a former spokesman for the government, for the military, to watch this administration just not respond or attack the source. Like, just answer the questions, it's like, and it's just much more. So you'll probably see a lot more reporting on this. I mean, what's next? I mean, what are you hearing next over there? I mean, there's got to be confusion and chaos. I know we don't want to give away your own story, but you are getting, I
No,
imagine you
well,
guys looking some more over there, aren't you?
well, I mean, so I'll just tell you honestly, one thing we're particularly interested in. We have a number of stories that we're looking at, but we are really interested in understanding the individual veterans, what individual veterans are facing. Right? Are they dealing with reduced services? Are they, dealing with not being able to get access to a trial? All that kind of stuff. We very much want to hear and want to tell the broader world about. I'll give you one other just specific thing, which is if anybody has had trouble getting a prosthetic device or say an electric wheelchair. I don't want to get too specific, but that is a thing I am very
Yeah.
interested in.
Well, those were handled by contractors too. I mean, I think when I
Mhm.
dig in more often than not, I'm feeling these contracts were just canceled willy nilly without any understanding of what they were doing and why. And it goes to this idea that every contract was bad, or that something like my favorite one was he said, "Oh, people taking notes." No, that's actually required by law. I was also doing a story for one of my other shows about the National Institutes of Cancer. Actually, no, it's in your story. Sorry, my brain. Your story talk about how you're required by law
Yes.
to report and do reporting on cancer research and cancer,
Yeah.
and they eliminated the contract that was doing that without realizing they were actually breaking their own laws. This is this constant turmoil of what is legal, what's necessary, and what's not, being done by people who have no understanding of the healthcare industry or what's required within science and science initiative. And you're right. I think the only thing that's going to happen is veterans are going to suffer for it. I guess I kept you long enough, sir. I appreciate your patience. Most important question I ask everybody, and again, tell us where they can find you online and everywhere. And then we did post the link so there's a link in the chat, you guys, where you can actually go and send those tips to you guys. Tell us where you're at. Tell us how to find you and all that good stuff.
Great. Yeah. I mean, folks should go to ProPublica.org where they can see the coverage we've been talking about, the link to share their story if they want to share their story. And if you click on my name, which is around there, you can always contact me securely on Signal. That way there's no trace and prying eyes won't see it.
Well, unless you're Pete Hegseth. So don't add the Secretary of Defense to your Signal chat. You'll be just fine. Eric, I know you've been a busy man. Thanks for taking time to join us. We really appreciate it. A couple thousand people here to talk to you and appreciate the hard work. It matters. Like I said, I'm a journalism fan because you dig up the things that we don't want, that the government doesn't want you to know, especially ProPublica. That is literally the mission you have. And it's probably why you guys keep winning awards. Thanks for keeping track. I bet we'll drag you back here, and we look forward to your next report. And thanks. In the end, my part that I like the most as a veteran is taking care of veterans. By reporting these things and what's happening to my fellow veterans, that's taking care of veterans, and I really appreciate that. So thanks for everything you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks, sir.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Man, great conversation. I'm as you can see, I'm a little bit of a ProPublica fan. I admit it freely. I've donated them in the past. I recommend it highly. Don't listen to these guys about how being left leaning. Now, truth doesn't have a politics, right? And again, it's funny. I met years ago. I was at a conference in Washington D.C. and the reporter, name escapes me because my brain's so broken, but who reported the Walter Reed scandal. And she approached me at an event I was at in DC, and she kind of walked up casually, very carefully to me, and she goes, "Oh, are we still talking? Like, why?" She goes, "Oh, the Walter Reed story." Apparently, a lot of my peers who had been military spokesmen and officers had turned on her and felt that she had, gotten them in trouble. But the truth is that the reporting on Walter Reed Hospital, the scandal there in the early 2000s, saved lives. That they did discover that it was all true. My God, folks, Walter Reed itself is gone now because it was so decrepit and falling down, they couldn't save it. So that's what good journalists do, okay? Good journalists reveal the truth of what the government's doing and take care of our fellow veterans. In this case, Eric and his team at ProPublica are doing just that. So I'm a fan of good journalism, even if it hurts. And I was trained by a great boss who said to me, there's no positive or negative stories. There's factual, there's accurate, inaccurate, and false. If a story is accurate and it's negative about us, then they got us, you know. If it's inaccurate, if it's false, we'll call them up and get it corrected. But there's no positive, negative. There's doing the right thing. So that's my rant. I'm sorry about that. So exciting news. We told you last week, we've got a town hall with Pete Buttigieg. That is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, this Tuesday, May 13th in the evening. I will be there talking to people who are attending, maybe talking to Pete, who knows, you never know. This is a really exciting thing. I was in the chat, you may have seen me typing away while we were talking. I was talking to JJ behind the scenes saying, hey, put up the link so people can sign up. It is at capacity, folks. We have over 3,000 people have signed up, RSVP, to show up for the town hall. Maybe you can get on there and get a waiting list. We will be live streaming it though. So if you look here, right where your favorite bat channel, right here on the Vote Vets channels, as well as several other, we will be broadcasting it live. I'll be doing a live stream. I think hopefully the technology works. JJ's like rubbing his head back there. We'll be doing a live stream. We'll be talking to some folks who are attending, talk to our fellow veterans before the event, and then after, of course, during the event, Pete Buttigieg will be talking about veterans issues at the Vote Vets Town Hall with former Secretary of Transportation and combat veteran Pete Buttigieg. I hope you'll watch us next week, Tuesday night. Make sure to make time to watch that. I'm sure it's going to be fascinating. Can't wait to see it. This is a great. Yep. We are not that much in depth, but good try there, buddy. And we are here because we are tiered. Our mission is simple. Take care of our fellow veterans. Keep the promise to our fellow veterans, fight for the benefits and the health care they receive, fight for our national security, fight for those who fight for democracy. That is our mission. That's what we do. If you want to learn more about VoteVets, go to votevets.org. Very easy, votevets.org. We're votevets.org everywhere. That's where our website is. As we mentioned every week, there's two key places. There's the donate button. I would love you to donate. That helps pay for all this, keeps JJ and I off the streets. And then the last one is the take action button. The take action button's where you can sign up to do things, to get a heads up about things like, I don't know, town halls in your town. Maybe if you're a veteran of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, pretty sure you got an email telling you that we've got a town hall coming before everybody else did. That's a really good thing about signing up for these take action, getting on our email list, and we will be in touch with you. So I hope you'll consider either or both. Donate and or take action. We'd love to have you as part of the team. I don't want to keep you much longer. Okay, so every Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern, right here, the Vote Vets channels. I am Fred Wellman, retired Army officer from the United States Army, 22 years. This is Vote Vets, on the line with Vote Vets. I hope to see you next week. Let's do it again.